So Israel wanted a king, and God brought in a guy that was a donkey farmer. Said, I got the perfect guy for you. I love the month of December. Yeah. And I look forward to, with great anticipation, studying and thinking about God giving his son, Jesus Christ. Amen. And I just love looking and reading Luke chapter 2. And every year I try to read it over and commit it to memory more. Sometimes I'm more successful and sometimes less, but I just love how all of those things that God did came to happen as he said at that particular time. I love the message of the angels, which always starts with 2 words, fear not. I love the idea of God coming and taking his word to the shepherds. I love the wonder of it all. And I think that, I was talking to Miss Catherine this morning, I said some people, the wonder of the season just springs upon them and you can see it in their eyes. And other people, it's like a crock pot, they heat up a little slower. But there's a whole lot of things that God has given us. If you think and understand or study it all, there's 1,500 prophecies in the Old Testament that are fulfilled and brought by Christ. Cleon read to us out of Psalms 22 this morning, and it's a look at Jesus Christ and his crucifixion. It starts with, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And it was thousands of years before Christ died on the cross. Now, we come to a place in history where we can look back and say a couple thousand years since he died on the cross. And definitely we're looking for his coming. What a blessing and a joy that we can share as Christians. I want you to know that this is a great time to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's a great time to look at Jesus in the manger and then go to Jesus on the cross and discuss our opportunities for forgiveness and the blessing that is salvation. Don't worry about a thing. It's just us chickens here. I always like that. I like looking and seeing that Mary took all those things and pondered them in her heart. And I like to have a treasure of things in my heart, things that God's done, that he showed me, blessings that I've received, and just the goodness of the Lord. How amazing and wonderful that we have salvation, is that we have a Savior. Just a couple things I really enjoy thinking about, and I hope you do too. And you can put those in the back of your mind on one of the littler burners and kind of put it on low and let it simmer and use it as part of your meditation. It's a joy and a blessing. Where it says in Deuteronomy 6 that when you sleep, it'll keep you. When you wake, it'll talk with you. It'll be a blessing and an encouragement. That's God's word. Look with me in Deuteronomy chapter 7, and we're going to go to verse 12. And I want you to understand a couple things. Just going to lay a little groundwork. Deuteronomy is very similar to a document that was common at that time, and it was a tributary document. Now, the Hittites had discovered iron, And they made spears, and they made chariots, and they made clubs and axes and different implements of war. And iron implements, knives and swords and spears and the different things, were very much superior. Now, they were heavy, but they were very much superior to wood. If you can imagine, if you read the area where David and Goliath are battling, the children of Israel did not have blacksmiths at that time, so they didn't have any. They had two swords. Jonathan had one, and King Saul had one. And no one else in the kingdom had a sword. So when the Philistines were on one side of the valley, they were over there with all their implements of war. The children of Israel basically had sticks and stones, may break my bones. But names will never hurt me. But no, and Goliath's calling names across, but they had the weapons over there. For some reason, they didn't have the quite confidence to just come over and take the children of Israel on man to man, face to face. They wanted to bring out Goliath and intimidate them, and it was working really good. But they had not those things. And the tributary would come in and would say, how would you like to buy some protection? Protection for what? Well, for fires. You know, your business might burn down tonight if you don't buy some protection from me. So the tributary would come in, he would gain advantage militarily, and then he would say, if you guys pay us this much every year, you can live free. We'll let you even keep your government. Just you got to pay your tribute every year. Now, we go to the New Testament, and Jesus said, pay tribute to whom tribute is due, interestingly enough. So we have the tributary, and the tributaries would give a document. A document was similar to a contract. Deuteronomy is similar to a contract. The tributary would say, here is what is required of you, and here is what we'll do for you if you pay your tribute properly. Now, the next part of it was, if you don't keep your side of the contract, we're going to come and punish you. And it's spelled out, and here's what we're going to do. Now, the Hittites were the ones that started being very successful at this, but they would give this document, a tributary document. It was like a contract, and Deuteronomy is written very similar to those documents. And God said, if you will follow and obey these statutes, these commandments, and these judgments, I will bless you. And I'll bless you till the cows come home. I'll bless your field. I'll bless your family. I'll bless your worship. I'll bless your cities. I'll bless your health. I will bless you in many different ways. We're going to get to a part of Deuteronomy where God says, oh, by the way, if you don't, here's what I'll do. And really, it's a book of conditional blessings. If you do this, I'll do this. My dad would give us conditional jobs. And a couple times he said, boys, if you will weed all the beans, we will go, and you can go fishing. We went out there Monday morning, and we weeded all the beans. Monday afternoon, we went fishing. Wednesday afternoon, my dad came down to where we were fishing. Said, boys, maybe you ought to come home. Your mom's getting worried. So we were just gone for a couple days fishing. Cleon took a frying pan, and we cooked some fish and ate them, and just camped out and enjoyed fishing life. And we had complete blessing of our Father to go fishing. I don't think we negotiated how long we were going to go, but we were gone for a while, and we quite enjoyed it. Look with me here in Deuteronomy 7 in verse 12. And it says, wherefore it shall come to pass, if you hearken to these judgments and keep them and do them, that the Lord thy God shall keep unto thee the covenant and mercy which he sware unto thy fathers. So we go back to the Abraham covenant. We go back to the promise that God gave Abraham, where he promised him that he'd give him the land there. He promised him that he would bless him. He promised him that his seed would be as the sea shores. He promised him that in him, speaking of Jesus Christ, all the families of the earth will be blessed. And he's talking about Jesus Christ purchasing salvation for mankind. So God gives these conditional blessings. In Psalms 105, verse 8 says, He hath remembered His covenant forever, the word which He commanded to 1,000 generations. We talked about the length of a generation. And if we think about this, a generation is really a lifetime of a group of people. When we have one generation stacked on top of another, and if you look at a generation, some people give different lengths of time for it. You could say a generation is 70 years, or you could say here comes another generation. They kind of connect and daisy chain together, that it's less. But 1,000 generations, nevertheless, is a very long time. So the Lord keeps His commandment. He keeps His covenant. He remembers it to 1,000 generations. In verse 9, which covenant He made with Abraham and His oath unto Isaac, and confirmed the same unto Jacob for a law, and to Israel for an everlasting covenant. Jacob and Israel are the same one, unless you look at it as a nation of Israel. But you see Jacob wrestling with the angel of the Lord there, as he's waiting to see Esau. And he says, I'm not letting go till you give me a blessing. Now, the angel of the Lord was Jesus Christ, and was pre-incarnate Christ, and he definitely could have defeated him at any time, but he wrestled with him all night. Interesting, isn't it? And I want you to think about how God never forces us to do anything. He asks us to do everything. Now, once I understand and believe something that God has shown me through His Word in the Bible or His revealed will for my life, then I feel constrained. And I want you to know that the love of Christ constrains me, not the vengeance or the threat of punishment. But the goodness of God leads me to a place where I want to follow and I want to obey Him. God has been so very good to me. He has led me gently. He has given me time, He's given me grace, and He's brought me along. Now, you all don't know where I used to be, but you don't know where I'm going to be either. And God's still working on me. He's still building me, He's still growing me, He's still sharing His word with me, He's still fellowshipping with me, He's still walking with me, He's still talking to me. The goodness of God. So God confirms to Abraham and then to Isaac and then to Jacob. Now, that's a chain that goes down, and then Jacob, he travels and marries Laban's 2 daughters, comes back and has all his sons, and they end up going down into Egypt 430 years later. God remembers His covenant and reminds His children of Israel, and they're going back to the promised land. Now, they took the short trip, but the long way of getting there. They definitely went the long way home. But God remembered His covenant. It's interesting that a generation that came out of Egypt saw the goodness and the grace and the glory of God, saw the plagues on Egypt, walked through the Red Sea. However, instead of being solid-souled believers, they doubted at every opportunity. And the Bible says that they tested God or tempted Him in the wilderness. They refused to believe, even to the point where they put the serpent up on the pole, that some of them refused to go and look at it. It's all they needed to do to be cured. In spite of other people in their vicinity going and looking and being cured and coming back and telling them. It's kind of like when we tell someone about Jesus Christ and knowing Him and having salvation and being forgiven and going to heaven, and they say, you have your religion and I have mine. They won't believe and won't accept and won't receive the goodness and the grace of God. So God remembered His covenant, and He remembers it now. in verse 13, it says, He will love thee and bless thee and multiply thee. He will also bless the fruit of thy womb, the fruit of thy land, thy corn, and thy wine, and thine oil, and the increase of thy kind, and the flocks of thy sheep, and the land which he sware unto thy fathers to give thee. You're still on the outside looking in. And God is giving this final law laid down by Moses. Now I want you to know that Moses is looking at this similar to how Peter was looking at it when he wrote 1st and 2nd Peter. He's like, I'm not going to be here much longer. Now, Moses knew, God let him know, they're all going in, but you're not. And here's one last time for you to lay down the law, not his own law, to lay down my law. To give the children of Israel instruction and a charge. I think about as children are. And at a point you have to let go in order for an arrow to be useful in any sort of way. You aim, you bring it back, you get that anchor, and you have to release. And at that point you let go and you let God. And the Lord works. And He works in them. He works on us. Remember how good and patient God's been with you. As a young person, I say, God, I can't stand adults. Just let me work with the kids. And God said, okay, you can work with the kids. And for 16 years, I was principal at the Christian school. And I worked with the kids. And God said one day, about 11 years in, He started to give me a burden. He gave me a burden through a conversation with another person. Another person was a friend I knew, and he said, you know, our church is going to be looking for a pastor someday, and we have a Christian school ministry, and I believe you'd be the kind of guy we'd look for. And I say, oh, no. No, I'm working with the children. And God brought that back to me day after day after day, and I prayed about it. And I remember several times in my life prayed about the will of God as God was revealing it to me slowly. Have you ever had an injury where you smashed one of your fingers? Bad. And here's what happens. Your brain says, oh no, that's bad. Your other hand says, you can't stand to see this. I got to cover it up for you. And then, little by little, slowly, you kind of peek and see how bad it is, so that your mind can receive it slowly. But always, my other hand covered it up to spare my eyes from the ugliness of whatever just happened. Now, eventually, you have to see it. God says, slowly, I'm going to bring this to you. I'm going to let you figure it out, and I'm going to reveal it to you, and then I'm going to confirm it, and then I'm going to say, boom, for sure, for keeps, no trade backs. And once God reveals something to you, now this is my understanding and my experience and my practice. Once God reveals some truth to me, I'm going to tell you, I haven't apprehended, I haven't conquered, I haven't got a handle on everything. And I know that. And there's some things, and you might ask me a question. I'll say, I'll study it and look into it. You might ask me a question. I'll say, that's a really good question. You get 10 points for that. Oh, am I going to get an answer? Well, not right now, for sure. I remember when I was getting ready to get into the ministry, and my brother Steve and I had a conversation. I said, Steve, and I was studying Deuteronomy right then. And I said, I want to study this book, and I want to study this book, and I want to understand this doctrine, and I want to know more about these people and their faith and what they believe and why we don't follow it too. And Steve said to me, if you wait until you're ready, you'll never do anything. He also said this is not an excuse not to study or not to prepare yourself, but you're never going to have everything figured out and conquered. He said, when I need it, God will provide it. I'm still studying His Word, and I'm still looking, and I'm still growing, but haven't figured out everything. So the children of Israel get this promise from God. It says, if you will hearken, if you'll follow these judgments, if you'll keep them and you'll do them, then He'll love you, He'll bless you, He'll multiply you, He'll bless the fruit of thy womb. That's talking about your children, the fruit of thy land. That's talking about the crops. Not just the crops. Remember, the land of Canaan was called a land of milk and honey. It was called a land of milk because it was a land where there was pastures and there was opportunity for grazing animals. And it was a place where lambs would grow to be 100 pounds in 100 days after birth. It was a place of honey because there was those pastures and wildflowers and different things. And the bees would gather and accumulate, and they would get that honey. It was a land flowing with milk and honey. Who has seen a honey tree natural out in the woods? Man, I've been so blessed. I remember this old beech tree. And it was back in the corner. We go back there. And when the wind was blowing this way, you could stand 50 feet from it and smell the honey. And the bees going in and out. And it's amazing how close you could get if you weren't very aggressive or looking like you was going to cause some trouble. And the bees would give you plenty of space and not come and bother you or anything. And not like hornets now. Hornets, they can smell per person, and they come after you with a vengeance. Those hornets we had out in that tree, them nasty, just horrible things. But the honeybees. Another time, I was mentioning this Wednesday, Jackie and I went squirrel hunting. We actually went to a wedding, and they had trouble serving the food in a timely fashion. So after about an hour, I said, Jack, I'm not going to wait any longer. I don't care if we eat or not. We'll just go somewhere and have dinner. And my brother Paul was going to go hunting, and we decided to go hunting. We went into this little woods that we didn't go into very much. And there was a tree falling down. It wasn't very big. Surprised how small it was to be a hunting tree. And because it had recently fell, the place opened up and there was honey spilling out. Now, I gave them bees plenty of room because I didn't want any trouble with them. I really don't want any trouble with an animal that can sting me. And not at all. I don't want any trouble with an animal that can bite me either. So, but anyways, we went in and we found that. So this was a land that God promised to bless. He said, the fruit of the land, thy corn, thy wine and thine oil, the increase of thy kine, the cows and the flocks of thy sheep, in the land which he sware unto thy fathers to give thee. When Abraham and Lot were going into the promised land together, and they came to a place where they both had so many herds, and that's how they accumulated their wealth in flocks of sheep or flocks of cows. And Abraham had so many flocks and so many shepherds and so many people, and Lot had so many flocks, and it came time to water everything, and they ended up with their guys fighting to get to the well first and get their watering done so they could have their chores over with. And that's why they separated. And Abraham went one way, and Lot went down into the valley and got in trouble out on the plain there with Sodom and Gomorrah. But the Lord says He's going to bless. And He promised a specific blessing, a specific place of blessing in the land which He sware unto thy fathers to give thee. I had a person ask me about God's will for their life. And they were very open and transparent with me. And the thing that they said was that a church had called and asked him to be their pastor, but he had made a a promise to God to be a missionary when he was younger. Now, I'll tell you this. Before I came to this church here, I had a fellow that I knew in the ministry, and he talked to me about a church in Grayling, Michigan. And everything that I did not go find, but God brought to me, I investigated honestly. And he went and talked to the pastor of this church, and that door shut real fast. There's another church in West Virginia that my brother Paul talked to me about, and I didn't go find that, so I searched that thing out honestly. It did not open up. There's another opportunity in Carolinas, and I looked into that, but it did not open up. And the reason for all that was because God wanted me to be here. Now, in my prayers, I had one specific prayer. My specific prayer that was God would give me very clear leadership, and that I would be confident and sure. I never wanted to wake up 10 years later and say, is this really the place? And I'm going to tell you this. As soon as God brought me here and united me with the church, and I'll say this, he welded our hearts together. And he made me confident and sure that this was a place I was going to serve him. And inside that, I'm happy because God made me sure. I always wanted to be able to serve with courage and confidence. And I've seen different pastors say, is this really where I'm supposed to be? Why am I here? What's going on? And I didn't want to be that guy. Now, I'm going to tell you this, that if the Lord had opened any of those other doors and taken me to a different place, that his will for me would have been to stay there and serve him. It's not necessarily a specific geographic spot that you have to be in. It's a set of behavior and a set of things that God has for us to do. And the Lord could have used me at any of those other spots, but he chose here. Now, I'm pleased and thankful for God's goodness and grace here. And I'm thankful that I haven't had to question it. When the children of Israel got up to the promised land, and they're getting ready to go in, and God says, get the priest and have them get the Ark of the Covenant by the staves, put the cover over it like you're supposed to, and have them start walking toward the river. And they're walking toward a river that is overflowing its banks. Down in Ohio, there was a Grand River that flowed through the valley in Geauga there outside of Troy. It went down the hill, and it was flat for a good long while, and it was flat along the river. And in the spring, the river would go up 2 feet, and it didn't get 10 feet wider. It flooded over acres of ground, maybe 50 acres. And you could go out there, and my brothers and I did this, you could go out there with some sticks. Now, the water was super cold. But in that shallow water was carp. And they would make a bunch of splashes and things, and you could catch those carp, and we would catch a certain amount of those carp. Now, we haven't ate any carp. We use them for fertilizer maybe or something like that, but it was definitely fun to go out and catch those carp. And it's just a large, and now the children of Israel, they're heading toward the ark, or with the Ark of the Covenant toward the river of Jordan. It's flooded its banks. And as the priests are walking and they get their feet over the water and start to walk down, God separated the water. And they walked through on dry ground. Now, do you think that reminded them of going across the Red Sea? I'm going to tell you this. Everybody that came out of Egypt 20 years and older did not go in the promised land with the exception of Joshua and Caleb. Not even good old Moses. God said, because of your unbelief, you won't enter in. We're going to march around out here till the last of you is buried, and then the new group is going in. The things that they had seen, the glories of seeing the Nile River turned into blood, and knowing that God did it as a punishment to the Egyptians. Now, if you were a slave in Egypt and you were gathering straw and making bricks and building for the Pharaoh, and all of a sudden God turned the river into blood to teach the Pharaoh a lesson, how encouraging would that be? Now, it was encouraging for a short time because they got back to complaining pretty quick. If you could imagine seeing all the frogs. Frogs in the bedroom, frogs in the oven, frogs, everywhere frogs. Having the lice, the hailstones and fire. All the things that God brought to you. Crossing the Red Sea. Seeing a pillar of fire by night. And say, what's that pillar of fire over us? Oh, that's God. How glorious that is. How amazing. I look at the wise men following a star and we're thrilled by that. But they had a pillar of fire over them by night. I got to look up and see the presence of God. I want you to know that if you have a Bible, you can look at it and see the presence and glory of God. Sometimes each generation misses what God has done for them. So in Numbers 6:24, the Lord will bless thee and keep thee. The Lord make his face to shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. The Lord lift up his countenance upon thee and give thee peace. So here are the children of Israel, and here's God's conditional promise. He says, I'm going to bless you if you will obey. A blessing follows obedience. There's blessing for the family, blessing for their physical health, and blessing in their faith and worship. In 7:14, thou shalt be blessed above all people, and there shall not be a male or a female barren among you, or among your cattle. In 15, the Lord shall take away from thee all sickness, and will put none of these diseases, evil diseases of Egypt, which thou knowest, upon thee, but will lay them upon all them that hate thee. In 16, and thou shalt consume all the people which the Lord thy God shall deliver thee. Thine eyes shall have no pity upon them, neither shalt thou serve their gods, for that will be a snare unto thee. If thou say in thine heart, these nations more than I, how can I dispossess them? Thou shalt not be afraid of them, but shalt well remember what the Lord thy God did unto Pharaoh and unto all Egypt. So many years later, the Philistines have the Ark of the Covenant, and God starts to send them some trouble. And they're like, we got to get this thing back to the children of Israel, or their God is going to destroy us. We've got to restore it back to them, or their God is going to continue to take vengeance. And they say, remember what happened to the Egyptians. All right, we got a couple minutes. I wanted to have some time to fellowship after class this morning. So, Jake, why don't you pray and end our class this morning?
You've been listening to a message from the pulpit of Town Center Baptist Church in Happy Valley, Oregon. We invite you to come visit us at 10505 Southeast 85th Avenue in Happy Valley. If we can be of help to you, please call us at 503-659-4494. We wish you God's very best.